Fish on.
Really nice looking fish.
Wow, that's a trophy.
That's a hog.
Woo! Nice job, you two. There we go.
Lund Boats proudly presents the ultimate fishing experience. This week on Lund's The Ultimate Fishing Experience. Sunfish are one of the most sought-after game fish in North America. And for good reason. In a lot of lakes, they're often plentiful and willing biters. But a true bluegill can be a rare beast. In the northern part of its range, it can take over 10 years to get to substantial size. And pushing 12 inches could arguably be tougher to catch than a 50-inch musky.
Look at that. Look at that. Whoa, dude.
So what's the key to catching big gills? Well, first and foremost is fishing lakes that have the capacity to produce them. And second, understanding their seasonal movements to track them down. Or you could take the easy way out as we did and hop in the boat with a man they call Mr. Bluegill.
Being versatile, use your electronics, get out and just explore. This is usually a good reward right here. Hey everyone, Troy Peterson, Mr. Bluegill, and we're in central Wisconsin right now. It's summertime, and the beautiful part of central Wisconsin here is we have a lot of small glacier lakes that are full of really big bluegills. My buddy Dan Swadek here and I are gonna go and try and catch a bunch of these fish. We'll probably hop around to a couple different lakes, so stay tuned, and we're gonna go have some fun today. You know, bluegills are super easy to catch when they're on their beds. Everybody knows that, and I like to kind of leave those fish alone when they're on their beds, let them do their spawning. And Dan here too, he fishes the rivers a lot, and just to protect the fish is kind of something that's kind of getting real sacred to me. So as we get into this later summer and these fish start to move off their beds, get out into some deeper water, number one, we lose a lot of the fishing pressure, so that's nice. The lakes are kind of all to ourselves. And two, there's a whole bunch of different techniques that you can use rather than just throwing corks out or whatnot. And today, what we've been finding is with the high water that we have this year, a lot of these fish are still kind of in an early summer pattern versus late summer. Typically they're out over the deep basins all schooled up, and we're still finding them in a bunch of weed pockets and just on top of the weeds, especially on a cloudy day like today. With how clear these lakes are, these fish are going to be up probably just a little bit shallower than what they would typically be for this time of the year. And we're going to be using a lot of small tungstens, some plastics, maybe throw some wax worms or some live bait on, depending on how the bite is. But it's been pretty fast and furious when you find them because they're schooled up, but they're just not over the basins. It's going to be a lot of fun, I can tell you that for sure. Ooh, this might be a good one.
There's a puller.
Oh, this might be a good one.
Oh yeah.
There we go.
There's a
big old mama.
Ooh, there's a nice one.
Look at the belly on her.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
Pretty females. These bigger bluegills compared to these small ones, anybody can go by a dock and you see all the little guys, just kind of swimming around. You drop a split shot, a hook and a worm and a bobber, and you can catch them. But with these big bluegills on these clear lakes, especially when you got bright blue sunny skies out, these fish tend to go down deep. And what we're finding today is a lot of these fish, we're finding these weed edges, and they're not up above, they're actually down in the stalks. So if you can picture you're walking through, you know, a big woods and you've got a canopy of trees and you get down into the, you know, to the tree stumps, what we're doing is getting these little tungstens to fall down through those weeds, get down in the bottom in those stumps, and just kind of dragging it along the bottom. And these bigger fish are down there kind of sitting, you know, in that tight cover under the shade, staying a little cool, less light penetration, and that's where we're finding these bigger fish. So, you know, you really got to play around with colors, and so what we're using with these smaller baits is we're finding with these smaller baits, I can feel that bait kind of fall down off those leaves and then actually hit the bottom and then start dragging it. So play around. You know, we actually had to resort to some waxworms, some live bait, some crawlers, some plastics until you find out what they want. And you know, time of the day too makes a big difference. You know, they have feeding windows just like every other fish. And as we get closer in towards the late afternoon, these fish will typically come up and start rising up above the weeds and get a lot more aggressive. And then we can usually switch tactics up a little bit again and you know, cast, you know, maybe some smaller stuff and keep it up above the weeds versus down below where we're getting them right now.
Closed captioning is brought to you by Mercury Marine. Go boldly.
Yeah, buddy. This might be what we're looking for.
Yeah, I'm pulling pretty good. Nice, that's a dandy.
That's a good one. Oh,
There we go.
oh. Good old central Wisconsin bluegills. You know, we switched lakes here. You know, we just got into a pot of 8.5 inch fish, and we just couldn't get the big ones to go. And a lot of times when you do that, it's just time to learn and move on. So we just hopped over here to another little lake and fishing some of these deeper weed edges, and beautiful. You know, one of the critical components of having successful day, especially in this clear water, is the ability to use a spot lock from that Minn Kota Terova. You know, we're not dragging anchors across the bottom. We're not stirring anything up. We can very precisely move along these weed edges and hit our spot lock, and we're staying in one spot. And we can fan cast an area, use the jog function and move back, you know, 5 feet at a time, and just continue to work down these weeds. So very critical for the type of fishing that we're doing. Thick. We need the males now just to get the color. Another one. That's a good one here too. Yeah, they are laying down in those stalks. Oh. Come here, girl. Good year class of bluegills. These are, you know, probably 9.5s. Super thick fish though, really big bellies on them, nice and wide. There again, you know, I just letting, what I've got on here is, you know, just a small tungsten. It's actually a 16th ounce tungsten with a waxworm. Let her go. And you know, it's a small profile, and the copper, for whatever reason in these clear lakes, what I found is that copper has always been a good color for me, whether it be winter or summer. The copper, for whatever reason, just triggers these fish. And I'm letting it lay down on the bottom, almost like you're dragging jigs for walleyes, and I can feel them coming. They're just picking it up off the bottom. You know, so when you're out bluegill fishing or pan fishing in general, you know, bluegills, with all the latest gear that we have, all these new tungsten jigs and high definition plastics, for the most part you can usually catch those fish on there. But there's always that day that you know, your cold front comes through and the fish slow down, and you just need a piece of meat. You know, it's kind of like me. You can eat Snickers and candy bars, but you always want that steak at the end of the day. So, you know, waxworms, crawlers, you know, even some thunderbugs or hellgrammites always work. And you know, just keep trying it until you find something that they like, and stick with it. It's a gill. Bluegilla? Bluegilla. Ooh, hefty, hefty, hefty.
So here we are out with Mr. Bluegill. So Troy, how did you come to be Mr. Bluegill?
Oh boy. So Mr. Bluegill. So the name, back in, it was 2001, I believe, the PWT championship came to Madison. And growing up, you know, I used to follow a guy that everybody knows, Mr. Walleye, Gary Roach. And it was always my dream to, you know, fish with him or get to know him or meet him. And I actually met a really good bluegill fisherman, an ex-PWT pro by the guy of Dick Stilley was his name, out of Oshkosh. And he was really good friends with Rocher. So they came to Madison and up to Green Bay for another tournament and introduced me to him. And boy, it was kind of a start of a long-time friendship. But at the time, my license plate said Mr. Walleye. And as I got to know Gary, he said, I can't have the Mr. Walleye thing going, so no more. So my license plate, I changed it to Walleye Fisher for a little bit. But then bluegill fishing with these guys, you know, through the ice in the wintertime, every time we go out, I'd pretty much clean their clocks. And they started nicknaming me Mr. Bluegill. So I figured if a guy like Mr. Walleye can call me Mr. Bluegill, I'll just run with it. And you know, it really is, you know, passion. You know, I got started fishing from my grandma and grandpa, fishing bluegills, and always wanted to be a professional fisherman. And just kind of living out my dream, and the Mr. Bluegill thing kind of caught. And I trademarked it, and here it is, you know, 17 years later, and Mr. Bluegill thing's been going good for me. Everybody says how easy bluegill fishing is and how, you know, oh, anybody can do it. You know, you have days where the big bluegills are just like anything else, big deer or big walleyes, and you know, you can struggle, you know, just as much as anything. You know, we caught a ton of fish, but you know, when you look for those big ones are in different areas and they don't behave the same way as the small ones do, and you have to adapt. And some days it means you catch a whole bunch of them, some days it means that you're only gonna get a few. You know, that's why they call it fishing, not catching. But you still got to come out and enjoy it, and you know, the hunt is on, and you want revenge the next day, so we're going to try that. So today we're fishing out of the 1775 Adventure Series from Lund, and the beautiful part of this boat is it's extremely economical, but it fishes like a, you know, like a bigger, more expensive boat. Great family boat. You've got jump seats in the back. For the kids, you've got a really nice casting deck, lot of storage up front, live well, you know, powered by the Mercury 94-stroke. It scoots along the water pretty good. You could do some tubing or skiing with the kids. You know, being almost 18 feet, it fishes good on some bigger lakes, but it's really nice for traveling around to some of these smaller lakes. Just an overall very economical boat that'll fit the need for a lot of people.
Oh, there's one.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yep, decent fish.
That's a tanker there. Look at the belly.
Nice fish.
You know, as the day progresses, what'll typically happen is these fish are a little bit shallower up in the weeds in the morning. They'll tend to slide out into those deeper basins, and you really almost have to do, you know, fish them like you fish walleyes. You can utilize your electronics, start looking for, you know, schools of fish, maybe some schools of bait, then just start casting to them. These fish will move around a lot over these basins throughout the day, and then towards the evening they'll start to come back up, hopefully to the shallower weeds again. I switched over to that spoon. Oh yeah, that's a dandy. You know, we went over and using electronics over this deeper water, and fishing on top of some of these deeper cribs, and looking for some of these bigger fish, and sure enough, the old spoon with some waxworms. Beautiful fish. So, you know, a lot of different baits that we've been using today. Guys use, you know, ice fishing. We've been using a lot of small tungsten, you know, with meat and plastic. But one of the things when they get finicky, or when we get over some of these deeper water fish, or fishing on cribs, is I like to use some spoons. Now these Phoebe spoons are actually one of my favorite. These smaller, you know, 32nd ounce spoons are great. put a waxworm on there, and when that thing flutters, when it goes down towards the bottom, it's got a really nice flutter, and that waxworm kind of stays up on top. A lot of times too is I'll just put a piece of plastic on there just to get a little bit more motion. But today they've been real finicky, so we've been having to use the meat. But you know, spoons work great. And going back to the basics, you know, just a split shot, a small hook with a piece of crawler or a piece of plastic or a waxworm. Even, you know, slip bobbers with leeches work really good too, and just kind of floating those baits across the tops of the weeds or these cribs, or when these, you know, these bigger schools get out over this open water. You know, you can cast out a couple of slip bobbers and work some jigs or spoons, you know, in the middle of the slip bobbers, and just kind of let the wind drift you through. So a lot of different various techniques, and you just got to try everything till you find something that works. Another nice bluegill.
Some really nice fish.
So what I'm using here for these bluegills and panfish in general, I like a nice long rod. This is about a 7 foot. It's a medium action, but it's got a super fast tip and really small guides. We're using some 4-pound Seaguar fluorocarbon. And you know, the reason I like that is when we're fishing light tackle, the last thing we want to do is have the line you know, hold up the jig. You want the jig to fall natural. With a fluorocarbon line, you're going to get that line to sink a little bit faster, and you know, just get that bait down into the zone a little bit quicker. For a reel, you know, about 1,000 series reel, something just you know, just big enough to hold a little bit of line. The one thing with the micro guides though that it's really kind of comes in handy is when you're fishing this small tackle, it can be hard to cast, and with the micro guides it keeps the line tighter and allows you to cast a little bit further. When we're in this clear water, we want to get those baits as far away from the boat as possible, and these micro guides definitely help that. Ooh, there we go. Aha. Ooh, another nice one on the spoon. That's a beauty. Put a little bit more meat on it this time. They were still acting a little finicky, so I decided to put 3 waxworms on here, and he just clobbered it. Boy, that one's pushing close to 10 inches there. That's a nice fish. Ah, there we go. So, you know, when you're fishing these spoons, the versatility of them is actually quite impressive. You can cast these and swim them back along weed edges, put them underneath you know, a float and actually swim them at a certain depth. Otherwise, what I'm doing here over the tops of these cribs is loading it up with a few waxworms and just vertical jigging it. You know, you can see that nice slow flutter. And just vertical jigging it right over the top of that crib, just like we're finesse fishing them, you know, through the ice. So, you know, I just look at it as I've got a 7-foot ice rod in my hand with a small spoon, and we're gonna ice fish for these bluegills in the middle of July.
Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, attaboy.
Tub thumping. There we go.
Oh, another nice one, Troy.
Yeah. Oh, he was peeing. You know, they just can't resist that spoon, especially we put on a few waxworms. They just absolutely love that thing.
Yeah, sure working for you.
Beautiful. Hold on, I'll put you back. You know, and you can actually too, if they're, you know, really aggressive and you want to you know, just kind of use it, you can take that treble hook off and just use a single spoon too. If, you know, they're really aggressive and you just want something a little bit bigger profile, single hooks work just fine. They put these massive log cribs out in pretty much every one of them is out in about 20 feet of water or so. And they stand about 5-6 feet high, and they're giant log structures, almost like a log home, big square cribs, and you'll find crappies, bluegills, perch, bass. The pike will come around and feed off of them. Very diverse fishery around these cribs.
Another one.
Let's go back to a tungsten.
Another crappie. Really nice crappies.
Big crappies. You got a gold on, Dan?
No, I have purple and white. Nice fish.
They're not eating my spoon all of a sudden. Oh, I got no bait left on it. Maybe that has something to do with it.
On the crappies. Get into them big gills.
They're here. That's unbelievable.
Got
Damn,
the bait.
man.
Another crappie.
crappie. They're just loaded crappies
Yep,
down here.
on the school of crappies. Oop, he just fell off. Good release. Yeah, right. So every time down, it seems like. Oh, I missed that one. Another crappie.
You gotta be right on. I'm off the edge of the crib, so you gotta be right
Oh,
on.
god dang it. I gave you a nice jump.
Isn't that funny how these crappies won't hit that spoon,
All
but those
right.
bluegills
I
will,
think they'd just be hammering that thing.
right? Stay in your hole. There we go.
There we go. That's a good one.
Ooh, this feels
That's
like a bluegill.
That's gonna be a gill, huh?
This feels like a bluegill. Feels like
Yeah,
a really
good
good
one,
bluegill. Now it's crappieing out. No, now it's going bluegill. Oh, we got a dandy.
Oh yeah, that's
look at this
Oh, that's what we're looking for. Oh,
Look at this
oh, oh.
giant. Oh,
That's
yeah.
a beauty.
That, my friends,
There.
is what we come to central Wisconsin and fish for. You know, we've had a pretty struggling day here trying to find these fish. We've tried just about everything we've had in this boat. Waxworms, night crawlers, plastics, spoons, tungstens. Being versatile, whether it be baits, locations, use your electronics, get out and you know, just explore. That's half the fun of catching. This is usually a good reward right here. Big old Wisconsin bluegills.
Thanks for joining us. If you'd like more information, check out lundboats.com or these other online outlets.